Welcome to another Pax8 Cyber Collective. My name's Elliot Cedo. I am a executive coach here at the Pax8 Academy in APAC. And today is a really exciting topic to talk about. We're talking about the CompTIA Trustmark. And as always within these, we've got our SME today, Wayne Selk, and I'll hand him over soon to do a bit of an introduction. And also our partner voice, Zaun Bhana. To talk a little bit about Trustmark and how it can be used amongst the partner community. Wayne, I'll start with you. You want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Glad to be here. I'm trying to get across the pond, the other pond, right, to come visit you guys. I'm Vice President of Cybersecurity Programs here at CompTIA. I'm also the Executive Director of the Information Sharing and Analysis Organization, but we're going to set that part aside for just a second for this discussion.
Perfect. Thank you. Glad to have you here. Zaun, I'll hand it over to you.
Hi. For those who I haven't met, my name is Zaun. I'm Managing Director of Leap Consulting, based out of Perth in Western Australia. So this is our 20th year as an MSP. I'm not sure what I did wrong to deserve that length of tenure, but still going strong. We have about 25 staff, predominantly service the small and medium enterprise market here in WA. Also volunteer and serve on the ConnectWise Global Partner Advisory Council. Have been a past member of the HDG or Evolve Peer Group Partner Advisory Council worldwide, and care about cybersecurity. Probably not as much as Wayne, but very much focused on seeing this help mature our industry, ourselves, and for our clients.
Yeah, perfect. One of the key reasons why I love having you on here is that Leap's gone through the process already. Probably the first in region to actually be Trustmark certified. How has that helped Leap in your journey into cybersecurity and offering that to your clients?
Yeah, so we went through the process a long time ago, Elliot. So when you say first in country, it does make me feel a lot old. A lot older than I probably feel like. But one of the lessons that we learned early was when clients are looking to evaluate a partner, they always look for proof points. Like any partner worth their salt is going to talk about our service. They're going to talk about their experience. They're going to talk about their partner affiliations. But those are kind of the same. So if you peel back most partners' websites, they're always going to say Microsoft, HP, Cisco, whoever. They're always going to say great experience, our staff are our best asset, and they're always going to talk about, how smart their people are, how customer focused their people are. We saw the CompTIA Trustmark, and at the time it was the Managed Services Trustmark, as a way to get validated on, okay, well, where we think we're doing okay in running a managed services business, but compared to who and compared to what? And so for us, that's why we went down the journey. It was like, hey, let's get certified. Let's get someone to audit us. And that's really what we're looking at. If you were an accounting firm, you could have the Chartered Accounting designation or the Certified Practicing Accountant CPA designation. In the world of MSP, CompTIA was the first organization we could find globally that had recognized and focused in that area. So yeah, we went down that pathway. And for us, it was as much as the name is Trustmark, for us it was a trust badge. So it was a way for customers to say, oh, you guys say you're good at managed services, and people always say that. How do you validate it? And that's what we would say is, hey, we've been externally validated. This organization has looked at us and reviewed how we operate. And we use that as a selling tool and as part of our marketing. So, and I think most partners are familiar with ways to do that. I mean, if anyone's gone through quality accreditation, they would look at the ISO 9001, but we wanted something that was specific and unique in our industry. And the CompTIA Trustmark was what we found, and it was the only one we found at the time that enabled us to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm on the same page, and this is why I've been so active in sort of positioning Trustmark to partners and saying, look, as a third-party auditing service, as have something accredited, have something that the industry and not only locally but globally recognise as some form of standard, because most organisations, MSPs, and government agencies don't have that recognition around what MSPs and TSPs can actually do. I've stated many times before that there are a lot of cowboys out there that try to do cybersecurity and say they're cybersecurity experts, and this gives SMEs and SMBs a way to sort of filter out and weed through those cowboys and actually find someone that is accredited. So it is something that I try to push actively. Wayne, from your perspective, it's been around. You said it been around for a while. You said it has gone through a revamp. One of those items as a revamp is you sort of switched up the framework that you guys are using over there as part of that auditing process. I believe it's now heavily focused on the CI's controls, which we talk about here at PAX8. What was the reason around that change?
Right. So let's clarify one thing real quick, right? Back in the Security Trustmark Plus launched in CompTIA 2008. It was revamped in 2014. And then when I came on board in March 2022, the members were already looking at redoing it yet again, right? Because, like most things, frameworks, especially government and even some of the non-government frameworks, they've got a 5 to 6 year cycle, right? Which is a long time in cybersecurity, a very long time for things to not be updated and kept current. In addition to the Security Trustmark Plus, there was also a print Trustmark, and there was also an MSP Trustmark, which Zaun talked about. I will tell you that as of when we launched the Cybersecurity Trustmark, which is the new one, notice no plus, we actually sunset all of the other Trustmarks, right? Because they were wickedly out of date. I think the print Trustmark is still going on because CompTIA handed it off to some other association. So we'll set that one aside for a little while. But all the other ones have been kind of retired at this point. The only one we're carrying forward today is going to be the CompTIA Cybersecurity Trustmark. And the goal here for the Trustmark overall was to create a set of best practices. We don't need another framework, right? One of the cool parts about the industry as a whole and being so tightly integrated with technology, there are other frameworks that exist in the world today. Center for Internet Security, Critical Security Controls. They're here in the U.S., which is also a global framework. Most people don't realize is the NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology Cybersecurity Framework. There's a number of other, there's privacy frameworks around the world. GDPR is probably the best known, right, globally as an entity. We have some internal here in the US too, but basically they're all based upon GDPR. And then there's a couple of other frameworks that we actually pulled in because let's be honest, and I know Zaun can talk a little bit about this too, right? The MSP space is very unique in that you are responsible for multiple industry verticals, which some are regulated and some are not. And it becomes very difficult to have one framework that can kind of, for lack of a better term, govern everything for the MSP. It just doesn't exist. Now, the Center for Internet Security, Critical Security Controls can kind of almost sort of get you there, right? And I think a lot of folks just saw that the NIST Cybersecurity Framework added a governance category, right? Hadn't existed for the past 10, 15 years of its existence. All of a sudden, boop, here we go. Governance is now important. Well, of course it is, right? There were a lot of things that actually came to play, and we didn't take everything. So I just want to be clear that, out of the CIS control set and out of that framework, there's implementation group 1, 2, and 3. And 3 being very
enterprise.
Like, yep. You want to talk about implementing some pretty interesting things. Those items are for the enterprise class that want to implement those prescriptive controls. Most of the MSPs today cannot implement the majority of IG3, right? The tools don't exist at our level of industry, which is why we did not include them. So as the members are actually going through and selecting the type and number of controls out of the various frameworks, I had strongly recommended and encouraged to them, don't make this impossible. The goal is to raise the bar. Now, some bars, and you may have heard about a 4-letter thing here in the US called CMMC, some of the bars are pretty dang high. For an MSP to make that leap, it's too much. Now, can we raise a bar to where they can take a long stride? Yes. And then guess what? We have the capability, because of CompTIA not having to worry about public comment, because we're managing to the industry itself. With members, we can set another bar and have it be another long stride and another long stride, right? Make things achievable year over year over year until we finally have a set where we can call it an industry standard, and then the industry can move forward, right? But slow growth,
Absolutely.
slow raising of the tide. Because you mentioned our very good friend Matt Lee, right? The goal is to not drown people. The goal is to slowly raise that tide. And he would also joke with me, but Wayne, some folks have their boat still chained to the dock. I'm like, yes, Matt. And we've got to give them the capability of being able to find a set of bolt cutters and go, okay, I'm on board, and clip the chain so that they can rise with everybody, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Wayne, what do you think? I was going to say, there's a lot of partners that obviously, they're looking at all of the frameworks that are around in the market. So they're looking at, there's the CompTIA Security Trustmark, there's the Australian Computer Society Security Trustmark, there's ISO 27001.
Yep.
So there's all these different frameworks, badges, as we spoke about earlier. What is the goal when you talk about raising the bar slowly? Like, what is the end point that you think CompTIA is aiming at with this certification? Do you want it to be the kind of global MSP standard when it comes to security?
Yes. And at such point, Zaun, it will have to come outside of CompTIA, right? Because the goal here is for the industry to actually finally coalesce around something that they can uphold and take forward. Because we already talked about the, what did you call them, Elliot?
Cowboys.
The Cowboys, right? We have folks that are here in the States, they call them trunk slammers, right? I think it's the same concept. We have the folks that are like, oh yeah, I can do that cheaper, I can do it better, I can do it faster. But are they really? No. They're not doing things in the same manner that the industry itself wants to move and wants to better itself to say, hey, no, we got this, right? We do know what we're doing. We can manage this overall. Much like the payment card industry did, the big 4, big 5 credit cards back in the day, created the payment card industry data security standard. But they didn't start out just going, here you go, these are all the controls. No, sorry, you have to do it. That wasn't how they operated. They did things very slowly. And they grew it out, and they built it out, and they built it to where folks could actually adopt it and bring it into their process, right? Because it does require people. It does require process. You can't just solve it with technology. And that's a slow changing of that perspective and that shift, right?
And outside of being a cowboy and not knowing you're a cowboy, what's the incentive, Wayne? Like, what do you think the incentive is for partners to jump on to the Cybersecurity Trustmark? Like, what do you think for them is like, hey, here's an incentive? Because obviously there's lots of choices, right? People can get vendor certs, they can get partner certs. Sure. What would you say is the big incentive for partners to jump on board this kind of initiative?
I think the biggest incentive is that this would be an industry focused and industry led effort. None of the other things you just talked about are, right?
Very true.
And that's everybody that wants to get involved in the Cybersecurity Trustmark has an opportunity to actually help shape this industry, whether you're in Australia, New Zealand. We have folks over in the ASEAN region of Asia Pacific, right? They are jonesing for something along these lines to get their federal entities, their federal governments to say, hey, we can do this. We have a mechanism today. Even the UK and the EU are on board. It's amazing to me too. We're actually seeing more folks engage in the Trustmark from the EU and the UK today because of the NIS2 stuff going on over there than even here in North America, which I was like, oh my God, right? The point is, and I've actually had a couple of MSPs, one in particular, share this with me. Wayne, I wish our organization would have gone through the Cybersecurity Trustmark first. We would have been better prepared for our SOC 2. I was like, holy God, can I get, can you put that in writing for me? I'd love that testimonial, right? Because we're taking a completely different approach. And that's the other fun part about this, Zaun, quite honestly. We have great people, Matt Lee. We have Chris Johnson on my team. We have a number of other MSP individuals that are like focused on providing help, education, training, assistance, guidance, direction for, hey, I'm having a hard time implementing, or I don't know how to really implement this inside of my MSP. What has everybody else done? And the community comes together to actually help them do it. Find another framework, find another set of certifications where you get that type of involvement from the community as a whole around the globe.
Yeah, it's very rare.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's key with CompTIA. Yeah, I think that's key with CompTIA, with your global reach and global presence. You're uniquely set up to drive this as a standardization across the globe, rather than having each individual governing regions have their own sort of format or framework or sort of advice that they've followed. It allows you to sort of collaborate across multiple areas and get different perspectives as part of that as well, which is great to see. So you can see how different regions operate, what the specific challenges are. You mentioned things like GDPR. Over here, we've got things like the Essential 8 and the larger ASD mitigation strategy. In the US, you've got NIST, CMS, MC. All of those things, have different elements that each region needs to sort of apply to. But I've seen multiple MSPs now sort of expanding and going to other areas, right? Not just across state lines here in Australia, but across ANZ, and some have even sort of jumped out into the wider Asia region as well. So it allows sort of some simple standard approach, which is great to see from CompTIA and why I love being part of it. Zaun mentioned, this being basically a badge you can use for marketing purposes. You can use to present to your clients. You use the example much to the chartered accountants or CPA standard that you do with accountants, making that correlation. Obviously, it needs to get in front of the end users or the businesses to be able to identify what to look for as part of a Trustmark certified or accredited organization. What is CompTIA doing to sort of spread the word and sort of engage the SME and SMB community to help identify those type of MSPs?
Yes. So we were invited to participate in the National Cyber Resilience Center group, which, believe it or not, is a global organization. It was KPMG, Microsoft, a few other big names are involved inside of an organization, and we're working on the agreement is still with my legal team. But the goal here is to actually help move more of this cyber resilience across the globe. It's not just a UK thing. It's not just an EU thing. It's not just North America. The nice part about the Trustmark is that we have this opportunity to actually help MSPs start down that whole cyber resilience journey, right? And how that translates to your customers is vitally important, because most MSPs, I don't care, pick where they are, any region, corner of the globe, they too are small, medium businesses and enterprises, right? In some cases, very small, maybe even micro. And you're dealing with those same type of customers as your clients. So if you can kind of get and grasp how to do things from an overall perspective as it relates to cybersecurity, you're the one managing their IT infrastructure. It's a lot easier because they don't have as much stuff to try to tackle, right? You can start sharing similar business-related stories together, not talking about technology anymore, but talking about how you can actually help their business succeed, right? And ultimately, that is a much better position to be in today from a sales perspective, because the sales then just happen. If when you align those two businesses together and go, oh, I understand your business goals. I understand your business objectives. Here's how we can help you achieve them. Here's a roadmap for your success. Here's how you can actually measure our effectiveness in helping you get there. Wait, what? How many MSPs have had that kind of a conversation today, besides Zaun?
Do you think, though, Wayne, that kind of, and you hear that at obviously a lot of MSP conferences where MSPs need to move and mature from talking about the tools, and technology to talking about business risk, business models, business strategy. That is also quite a significant jump for many organizations who are used to engaging on you've got a problem, I've got a recurring revenue solution to that. So there's a lot of that in the industry.
Yeah.
Do you think cybersecurity is at risk of getting caught up in that?
From my perspective, the interesting take on that is cybersecurity is a mindset, right? We're not really changing the game. We're just shifting a perspective, moving it away from an overall tool stack and moving it to more of what's the risk to my business for implementing or not implementing this solution? What is the risk to my business overall? And what's going to prohibit me from achieving my business goals and objectives? And I'll give you a perfect example. I go around teaching a risk management course. It's also recorded for the folks going through the Trustmark. I have a sheet of homework I hand out prior to folks attending. And I had one gentleman tell me in Vancouver, because I asked everybody to share with us. I said, what was your takeaway? What was the one thing you learned? And he just glared at me. And he goes, Wayne, I'm very mad. And I said, well, why? He goes, I'm a solopreneur. I design my MSP that way, and I outsource everything in my MSP to other people. And I'm like, wow, that's kind of interesting. I said, so what is it? Why are you mad with me? He goes, because you pointed out in this exercise that I've made a mistake. And I'm like, what's that? If you don't mind telling everybody. And he goes, well, because I've outsourced everything, I've put my entire business and my entire livelihood in the hands of other folks to be able to manage to my clients and what's going on. I said, so what's the problem? He goes, I don't have time to manage them. That's my risk to my business. I need to now hire somebody to be able to manage to the outsource folks so I can go out and do the business development to bring more people in. I mean, because what would have happened, right? I know there was an individual in Australia last year who ended up reaching out, who kind of did almost the same thing and actually lost his business to those outsourced folks. That's reality, right? So when we talk about risk and we talk about making sure MSPs, specifically owners, and also their employees, when we talk about risk to the business, we're pointing things out that are beyond the scope of cybersecurity, right? We're actually looking for things that can actually impact the business and impact the livelihood, not only for the owner, but there's a lot of folks that kind of work for you guys too, right? And if that MSP, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, I think one of the observations would be, and we're no different. Like, until it was pointed out to us, and I agree with Elliot and James when they have a lot of these conversations, and what you're sharing, Wayne, around risk. The interesting conundrum is if you were to poll a room of MSPs and ask them how many talk about risk as a risk management approach, like how many have a risk register? Like how many review their risk register yearly, quarterly, monthly? And so there's this dynamic maturing required, which obviously I think at the moment there seems like there's a flight to ISO 27001. At the moment, it's the new craze where you're seeing pretty much MSPs rush one after the other for what is effectively, another ISO badge, which, in 20 years ago was the rush to 9001. Right. Now it's the rush to 27001 in security standard. I'm curious, Elliot, you've got a lot of experience. You see a lot of partners doing that. And maybe this is a leading question. Do you see partners adopting 27001 as genuinely removing or reducing their risk? Or is it just simply a badge exercise as well?
A bit of both. And I love that the tables have turned and you're now hosting this and not me. But the ISO 27001, I think, is primarily led by the industry. So regulators are asking for it, insurance providers are asking for it as part of cybersecurity insurance, and that's what's driven partners to engage with that. And even clients themselves are saying, "Are you ISO 27001?" So I think that's a great example of why something like the Trustmark can work. Is when clients start asking for those type of things and saying, are you ISO 27001 certified? Well, those are the ones they're going to look for, right? If you're not, they're going to move on to the next partner that it is. So Trustmark can potentially have that effect, right, to the same sort of CA, CPA that it is to accountants and other regulators and other bodies out there. For the most part, I think ISO does tend to help lift the standards internally to the business as well, because unlike the CIS controls, which we talked about, that framework, which is heavy on the technology side, ISO 27001's really sort of looks at the processes and the people as well, right, on top of the technology stack, right? So that's, I think, the key differences there, because it's great to have technology and have your cybersecurity stack that you're doing for yourself and as well as your clients, but without the proper processes, policies, and making sure that the proper training is provided, which is where ISO really comes into its own. It's a great way for MSPs to at least protect their own house, right, for the lack of a better term. So I think that's the sort of two elements that I see with partners driving the ISO 27001 certifications. But yeah, you're absolutely right. For the most part, it's going to be a badge exercise. And again, that's generally led through the industry itself actually asking for it. So until that changes, until something like Trustmark becomes the thing they ask for and say, are you CompTIA Trustmark certified, right? I think ISO 27001's here to stay, at least for the short term.
So let me throw an interesting little point in there on not only ISO 27000, but also a SOC 2. Both of those audits are scoped. Guess who scopes it? The MSP. Not the client, the MSP. I know this is going to sound really weird, but I've actually seen audits for both of those scope down to nothing more than a desktop and a server in a closet. So the interesting part of that audit, both of those audits, by the way, are in the US, a couple of tens of thousands of dollars, by the way, depending upon the size of the organization and the overall scope itself. They're not cheap. Let's put it that way, right? They're very expensive. And there's a lot of work that has to go into preparing for that kind of stuff. And so this is why that whole quote from that other MSP was such a welcome surprise for me, because they recognized that they wish that they had gone through the Trustmark first, because they would have been better prepared. So the fun part about CompTIA, we don't make a dime. That's the God's honest truth, right? We have a lot of folks, a lot of partners that have actually put their time, energy, and effort into this, that it doesn't cost the MSP anything. It costs you time. It takes a little bit of your talent, and it's a very little bit of treasure on your side in order to go through the Trustmark. And the work product that comes out of the Trustmark is actually extremely beneficial for you if you want to then go down that path of an ISO 27000, right? All your processes are in place. Your policies are in place. Everything is lined up for you. You may have to make a couple of tweaks here and there, but at least your awareness and understanding is now elevated to a point where you understand why. Right.
I think you touched on that, and Zaun kind of mentioned it before. So the self-attestation part of it is a challenge, and MSPs or anyone self-governing for that matter, there's always going to be.
That's the problem with the UK model. I mean, if you look at the UK model, that they have the thing where the MSP can certify their clients.
Cyber Essentials?
Yeah. So if you look at the Cyber Essentials model, that the government really got that wrong in the UK, because the MSP is handing out attestation documents, basically the rubber stamp on its own clients. So it's kind of like that would be giving my kids the ability to rate their own homework. Like that is just a recipe for holes.
There's a natural bias there, right? That natural bias can lead to mistakes, and you thinking, oh yeah, I've got a password manager out there, I've got MFA enabled, without actually doing their due diligence and checking that those controls are actually enabled and running properly. So that's where third party comes in.
I mean, take that example, Elliot, around password management. Maybe this is a good thing for Wayne to chime in on. I mean, password management for MSPs is pretty ubiquitous and it's everywhere. A lot of MSPs have it in their stack or it's an add-on, but most MSPs are kind of familiar with having password management. And you were talking earlier about your experience in governance, risk, and compliance, Wayne. I think a question that you get is how many customers experience an MSP, and certainly I don't think this is a habit for anyone, but it's an observation. How many MSPs are going back to each individual user and saying, hey, you've got like 14 passwords on the breached list and you need to rectify them? Like if you're not enforcing that those clients are fixing their breached passwords, like that moves away from the tool conversation to a risk conversation, which is governance and assessment. So there seems to be a big gap where we can put in a tool fixing a problem, but not really mature enough to come back and actually solve the real risk. Because we've like, oh, you've got a tool and it's looking after your passwords, but we're still not removing or getting them to change those passwords unless that's a deliberate exercise. So I was hearing what you were saying, Wayne. Do you feel like that Trustmark, once it goes broader and obviously gets government involvement, do you see it being like kind of the accreditation to be an electrician or a plumber, where it's like this is table stakes to be in IT?
So the overall goal for the Trustmark 3 to 5 year plan is for it to become the industry standard. Yes. So it has to, right? I mean, to get there, it's going to require critical mass adoption, and not just in the US, right? This has to be a global initiative. Because again, an MSP in Australia is no different than an MSP in New Zealand. Let's just be honest. or in the US or in the UK or in EU or any other place. I don't care if there's one in Antarctica. It doesn't matter, right? The concepts are still the same for the types of services that the industry itself is providing as a whole back into the economies, whichever economy we're talking about. And we've already gone down this path. I'll say it here, right? We've actually applied for the trademark at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. We're waiting on our notice of allowance. That actually starts the 36-month clock. And we have to show the use of the trust mark by certified parties. So how's that, Zaun? I mean, I can't even.
That's. I mean, that you've heard it first, Elliot. You got like a world exclusive.
I know, it's fantastic. Thank you.
Not quite TMZ, but you know what? It's not bad. Like,
there you go. But seriously, and I really appreciate you guys coming on and wanting to chat about this too, right? Because the more awareness we can get out there for folks, and point counterpoint doesn't matter, right? Did we get it 100% right out the gate with version 1? No. Was that by design? Maybe, right? The overall goal was to hit 80% of the MSPs worldwide. Now, you may have heard me say this. I know other folks have. The top 5% are well on their way. They're very mature MSPs from a cybersecurity perspective. There's the bottom 15% that just don't care, quite honestly. They're never going to move until somebody makes a move. And that leaves that 80%. And I would even tell you there's 5 to 10% at the bottom end of that 80% that could fall into that bottom 15% easily. And there's also 5% at the top of that 80% that could move up into the top 5% and make it 10%. Right?
Yeah, some of those businesses, and it's kind of any industry leaders and laggards and kind of late adopters, there's going to be some that aren't going to change, and then they're going to lose their client to someone who's got a trust mark or, you know, some cybersecurity framework, and it won't be until they lose wallet share that they'll change. Kind of like cloud, like some people were like, oh, I'm not changing thanks to cloud, and it wasn't until they lost business they're like, okay, cool, yeah, I finally need to shift. So there's a long tail of that in the MSP industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something I could talk about for hours with you guys, but I wanted to ask and get Zaun's perspective on going through the process of Trustmark and implementing and getting certified. Was that challenging? Like, how did your team find that going through that process?
I think, and again, you know, knowing that this was a long time ago, but I think the journey when you go through any of these, but particularly CompTIA allocated us a person that kind of helped us set out the framework of what we were going to go on the journey. And then it was actually quite healthy because it was interesting to me because I wasn't leading it. I had an amazing guy that was working on that, Neil, and he did a fantastic job with the team on making that happen. And what was most curious was actually how well are the things as an owner that I think are in place? You know, it's kind of like you go to an event, you go to a conference and everyone says, how's your business? You're like, fantastic. You come back and you look at P&L and it's red, you know, so, and there's a lot of experience where actually until you go through the process, you know, I always say like you're not as fit until you exercise, and then it's even less unless someone's testing you when you exercise. So CompTIA really helped us, and that allowed us to get our house in order, I would say, when we went through the process. I wouldn't say it was challenging. I would say we learned that our version of what we call like our version of evidence or our version of compliance needed to mature. You know, so it actually helped improve our own competency on getting the documents together, the processes, the workflow. You know, that were ringing clients. So I think when you're having someone external ring your customers to validate what you say on paper and what you've written in an application, that was a really useful exercise. And I think from a cybersecurity perspective, I mean, we're seeing that with Essential 8. You know, there's more and more requirements. The CompTIA Trustmark, at least the process that we went through, was very robust, and it forced our team to think differently. And I don't know, for those that have brothers or sisters, you know, sometimes your brothers or sisters won't listen to anything you say, but a third party says something and it's like, oh, That's the truth. And so that was the experience we had with the CompTIA exercise. I might have been saying it, technical services manager might have been saying it. When CompTIA said it, we're like, oh, okay, yeah, we better listen. It was the exact same message. So I think if nothing else, you're going to see your team mature going through the process.
And that's important.
Feedback. Yeah. I don't recall it. Is it an annual audit that you do, Wayne, as part of that?
It'll be an annual revalidation, correct. Yep.
Okay. Yep. And that's to do with the frameworks though as well, right, Wayne? Like, because the framework changes, it matures. The Trustmark is going to mature, take feedback, and develop over time.
Yeah, they're already the members are already working on version 2. So yes, and we're expanding the number of governance, risk, and compliance tools who are able to share the Trustmark with their existing clientele. So that's one of the other challenges, is that MSPs don't have those type of tools in their belt today to be able to understand what are we doing right today, where are our gaps, right, and where are we failing. I don't like using that word. It's where could we really improve? Is what
do we need to do better? What do we need to raise up?
How can I actually improve what I'm doing year over year to actually become a better organization, to better help my clients, to help them better succeed in their roles too? Because the more they succeed, the more the MSP can succeed. That's the fun part about this exercise for us too.
Wayne, I mean, I've heard you talk about the Trustmark for a little while, but one question I haven't heard anyone ask is, what is CompTIA doing around the conversation with insurers? So insurers ask a lot of questions. I've heard government, I've heard clients, I've heard MSPs, industries. What is CompTIA doing around the conversation with insurers? Because they have a lot to say when it comes to this. What are you seeing? And I mean, again, happy if I'm treading on toes, and you say TBA, but what does that engagement look like with CompTIA talking to insurers?
Before Wayne answers that, so locally, I've worked with local Australian insurers and presented Trustmark to them as a sort of guiding principle, in the hope that they can use that as part of their policies, as part of their conversation to say, hey, look for a partner that has this badge. Because there's not many out there, particularly with the new revamped cybersecurity badge. That's obviously going to take 2.
He wasn't just giving us the finger. He was saying there's only 2 so far. 2 in Australia?
2 in Australia. Yeah. I know there's a couple, there's a few that are going through the process now, which is great to see. So I think the more partners get on top of it and then insurance can start using it, that's kind of that grey area at the moment where, chicken and egg scenario is one needs to lead before the other one can take hold. But Wayne, sorry, I'll let you answer that.
So here's, even early on, 2 years, a year before we actually launched the Trustmark, I was having conversations with the cyber insurance community set, right? The challenge for them has always been, they've been very reactive, go figure, right? Most MSPs are very reactive today when it comes to understanding a lot of things. Helping them also, as part of this process, mature their own awareness and understanding around cybersecurity inside of this industry is one of the other things that we've been undertaking. I'm having conversations with another fairly large MSP cybersecurity broker, believe it or not. And the more folks, again, we have going through this process, the more actuary data that they're going to be able to parse through to see whether or not the Trustmark is actually helping lower that risk. Because it's not just about lowering the risk for the MSP, right? It's also about lowering the impact of the risk for the insurance company. Because quite honestly, they've been hemorrhaging since they first got into cybersecurity and doing cyber insurance. Not an MSP problem there, right? Remember, they also had a lot of the clientele have cyber insurance, and they were getting popped because of the lack of maturity in cybersecurity from their overall IT service provider, whatever, right? IT and information security are two different skill sets. So that's part of the whole process of helping folks understand and raising that understanding. We're working with the insurance companies to be able to, because now we have, I have 2 provisional trust marks we've awarded already under the new Cybersecurity Trustmark, by the way. I should have a 3rd awarded by the end of this week. We have a total of 7 now, 8 in total that that have requested full audit. So I've got 6 more audits to do, 3 of which the folks from Crest International are going to be sitting in with me, because we're going to slowly transition the assessments over to Crest. But the goal here is I want to have a good minimum baseline of meets or does not meet or partially meets. Notice I didn't use pass fail in the conversation, right? Because that's not what this is about. This is about helping organizations actually succeed in implementing cybersecurity and a foundational security program. So we're working with the insurance companies. We're working with there's one over in the UK. I have 3 in the US. We're working with to kind of help them. We're going to start giving them some anonymized data, I think, over the course of the next 12, 18 months, as folks are maturing into this process. And it's taking, believe it or not, 12 to 18 months under the new Trustmark for folks after they sign up to say, okay, we're ready for our assessment. So it's not this isn't just a hurry up and boop, boop, we're ready to go. They're really taking their time to make sure that they're ready for this entire process. It's actually been quite encouraging, honestly, to see MSPs actually taking this very seriously, knowing that this is going to mean something to them at the end of the day, and then they're ready for next year going forward. So it's been a lot. It's really been a lot of fun, and I do mean that. It's been a lot of fun helping folks go through the process.
Yeah, that's fantastic to hear. All right, just to wrap things up, Zaun, last things from you, final thoughts. Should a partner, should an MSP look to engage with CompTIA and look at the Trustmark certifications?
Yeah, I would say at the moment, if you're in that 80% of partners who want to stay current, who want to stay in the market, and I would say, if you want to evolve and grow at some level, you have to align to a standard. And I don't think you can sit on the fence as an MSP. I mean, I'm watching MSPs opt out of security in some spaces at the moment completely. And for those that are doing that, they're engaging partners. But as Wayne said, there's some that are doing nothing. They're just completely opting out and say we're not interested. And that's pretty sad because there's a lot of livelihoods at stake. So I would say for any partner, you need to get on board a program. And as Wayne said, the Trustmark process is going to be global, in terms of its approach and its applicability. And that's kind of unique in its offering because, like ISO 27001, that's not affordable for every partner who's going to listen to this and watch it. And it's not, there's going to be partners that have every security framework under the sun because that's going to be their value add. And they see that as an example. But I think people need to pick one. Essential 8, you can't, it's not something that you can kind of attest to in a way that you can with a Trustmark. And CompTIA has a long history of bringing resources, but more importantly, I would say, and this is something around coming regulation, CompTIA is an incredible global lobbyer. And I think as MSPs, we need to pay attention to that. I mean, that's not really sexy and no one really talks about it, but you need to know where the lobbying's going. And I think as MSPs, CompTIA has that space really with MSPs in mind, and no one else is doing that to their level, which I think I'd give them credit for. So yeah, I would definitely support it and recommend that MSPs get behind the Trustmark.
Yeah, great advice. I think CompTIA, locally at least, I think most of the committee members, if not all, are in some form or shape within an MSP community or within a vendor that works closely with the MSPs. So it is very MSP driven. Wayne, what are your final thoughts?
Look, we're just here to help, honestly. If you have questions, that's fine. Ask. I mean, most folks don't realize we're vendor neutral and we're a not-for-profit. We don't, we're fortunate enough to be a self-funded not-for-profit through the certification arm. Our balance sheet comes to this at the end of every year, right? Which is amazing. I mean, again, help me understand why, we have folks that are itching, dying to help make this industry much, much better. And, we're just here to help.
Perfect. Thank you so much. If you're a partner and you've come to the end of this and you want to get involved with Trustmark, have a look on the CompTIA website. There's information out there. You can reach out to your local CompTIA committee members. Our very own Maria Armstrong in the Academy team at PAX8 is heavily involved with that. Davis Norris runs the local Trustmark program here as well. There are a number of partners out there that you can engage with. So really appreciate your time, gents. It's been a great conversation, and I can't wait for partners to have a watch of this. So appreciate the time again. Thank you, and I'm sure I'll be speaking to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.